Welcome to the Ergo2go podcast, brought to you by the Back School and Ability on Demand. I'm your host, Matt Jeffs. We bring you interesting people from the world of ergonomics, on-site injury prevention, risk management, health, safety, and well-being, and a whole lot more. Don't forget to subscribe below and click on the little bell in the upper right-hand corner to get the latest information on the overlapping fields of ergonomics, health and safety, risk management, human resources, and healthcare right here on the Ergo2go podcast. Today's guest is first and foremost the Executive Vice President of the Validation Institute, but he's also the principal of Healthcare Performance Incorporated and the principal of Worksite Health Advisors. He speaks and writes extensively on high-performance healthcare clinics and management of clinical and financial risk. It's my pleasure to welcome to the Ergo2go podcast nationally prominent healthcare analyst and commentator, Dr. Brian Klepper. Brian, welcome. How are you today?
Thanks, Matt. How you doing?
It's good to have you. It's always a pleasure. And you were put on my map way back when. I think we were on the same billing on some speaking engagements. And there's so much I want to get into that I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start here. You know, when we were talking, you led a movement, for lack of a better term, and excuse me for using those terms, but that really exposed the RBRVS system, the update committee that the AMA has that kind of is driving our healthcare patterns and our costs. Do you think maybe you could share with us a little bit about that experience, what you learned from it? And
that was an incredible thing. What happened was that I was asked to be a delegate to the Aspen Institute's first healthcare forum. This was about 2007, and I was on a van taking us from the hotel where we were staying to the campus with a guy, a physician who was also there, and he turns to me and he says, you ever heard of the ruck? And I said, no, never heard of it. And he said, when you go home, look at the ruck. The guy's name is Roy Poses. He's an assistant professor of medicine at Brown and something of a healthcare reformer. Mm-hmm. And so I go home and I read about it. And it's about how this cabal of physicians, 31 physicians, made up of 26 specialists and 5 primary care guys, have a sole source contract with CMS, used to be HCFA, mm-hmm. for the last 25, almost 30 years now.
Right.
And they are charged with defining the value of every medical service. And so they don't use science, they use a horse trading method that accrues to their benefit. And in the process, what's happened is the specialists get high values for everything they do. And the way that the voting goes, they vote the primary care guys lower money. Mm-hmm. And that has changed the entire complexion of American healthcare and probably added an unnecessary $1 trillion a year, because everything is designed to move around primary care and get downstream to where it's much more lucrative.
You know, I'm so glad to hear you say that. And when you exposed it, it was actually my own experience. I don't mind sharing that I worked as a physical therapist, as a rehab director for a group of specialists. I won't say the specialty, but I guess you could guess. And the model, as it was explained to me by its executive director, was a single word: churning.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was
healthcare has become largely about money,
mm-hmm.
and it in the way you and I were talking about it before. It has gotten to a place where the healthcare industry doesn't just exist, but it depends on doing unnecessary stuff, on unnecessary and inappropriate procedures and egregious unit pricing to keep the money flowing at the same rate that it has been flowing so far.
In a moment of candor, that executive director described his MRI, and I'm not making any of this up, Brian. He described his MRI as a money printing machine. He said,
Yes, exactly.
Patients go in one end and money comes out the other. Those were his words, not mine.
Right. And some of that is okay. We all have to make a living.
Sure.
But what has happened in American healthcare is that we pay double for lousy care. I mean, think of it in these terms. Half of everything that's done in orthopedics is inappropriate and unnecessary. This is not a speculation. There's an entire literature about this. Half of everything that's done in cardiology is wrong. Half of everything that's done in cancer is wrong. And so what has happened is that the American populace is being held hostage by this industry. And as a result of pushing all this money into the industry, we don't have money to spend on schools and roads and infrastructure and things like that. It's literally harming the republic.
Our colleague Dave Chase points that out. It's basically also decimated the American middle class. Employers are spending a lot on their employees, but it's all being sucked up by this healthcare model. That's right. Dave Chase has done a great job of explaining this in a way that nobody has before. Mm-hmm. One of the figures, since you have largely a musculoskeletal audience, mm-hmm. One of the figures that I like to point out is that musculoskeletal is about 4% of the U.S. economy, and if half of all of that is unnecessary and inappropriate, that means that just the stuff that we do in musculoskeletal that shouldn't be done is equal to about 2% of the entire U.S. economy. That's a breathtaking number. It's astonishing when you think, if you're thinking in the trillions, 15 trillion, whatever people estimate the U.S. annual economy is, or our GDP, that's just astonishing. Yeah. How does this background, and your background with organizations, you've done some things with on-site provider models, you've been the CEO of the National Business Coalition on Health. How has this prepared you for today, right now, in your high-performance healthcare analysis? So, after running a healthcare consulting practice for a number of years, national and international, mm-hmm. I went through a period where I sort of lost my mind, and I thought I would personally fix American healthcare. See how effective that was? and a little bigger than one person, but go ahead. So I ran an organization called the Center for Practical Health Reform. And the idea of that was to bring all the constituencies together, which was a mistake, by the way, and to say, what is the smallest set of structural change principles that nobody would willingly buy into if they had the option to do that, unless the only alternative was disaster. And what are those principles? And we defined those. Mm-hmm. And we had members like the American Hospital Association, the Blues, Southwest Airlines, Microsoft, Marriott, people like that. Mm-hmm. But the sad truth was that as long as everybody in Congress and in the legislatures has open arms to bribes from the industry, you can't get anything done. So I realized that, and in 2007, I decided to go back into the industry, and I took an ownership position in an on-site clinic company, a worksite clinic company, with two partners who were excellent risk managers. And I began to see at a practical level the level of waste and excess that was in the system, and how you could get that waste out and deliver better health outcomes at much lower cost. And later that led to, when I left the National Business Coalition, because I had realized that they were taking money from industry interests, and it was undermining their own members' interests, and I didn't want to be associated with that. Mm-hmm. I got the idea to start looking for healthcare organizations that got wildly better than normal healthcare results, and typically with much lower cost. Mm-hmm. And
and that we're setting a new bar for value within particular niches. And I set up a structure to begin to find those organizations, vet them, and then take them to employers and unions by way of saying, if you do this, the goal is to be able to say, look, if you work with us and do the things that we show you, we will financially guarantee you, pick a number, a 25% reduction in total spend with better health outcomes. In other words, let's make employers an offer they can't refuse compared to what they're used to getting from the major health plans.
And with your offering, it sounds like you're offering skin in the game yourselves. You're putting yourself on the line a little bit and saying, this is what we're expecting.
We don't. So in the group that I work with, we don't take any money from the vendors. So we're not selling the vendors.
Mm-hmm.
We settle on a vendor that we think is best of class, and we take it to the employers and the unions, and there are some other organizations that are interested as well. And we say, put this into place. Let's track the numbers, and we will take a percentage of the savings for 3 years, and that ought to be gracious plenty for anybody.
Excellent.
And we can talk about some of that in depth.
I think we should. And we usually split these up into 3 segments. That way people can get bite-sized chunks of it. And
Sure.
I was wondering if you'll hang out for a little bit, and we'll return with our second and third segment and dig a little deeper. Would that be okay?
That's great. Let's
Awesome.
do that.
All right, fantastic. You've been listening to and watching the Ergo2go podcast. I'm your host, Matt Jeffs, brought to you by the Back School and Ability on Demand. We bring you interesting people like Dr. Brian Klepper, people from the world of ergonomics or on-site injury prevention, health, safety, well-being, risk management, and a whole lot more. Don't forget to subscribe below and click on the little bell in the upper right-hand corner to get the latest info from the overlapping fields of ergonomics, health and safety, risk management, human resources, and healthcare right here on the Ergo2go podcast. Until next time, everybody, let's be safe, let's be smart, let's be helpful, and let's get to work. See you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.